One dark night, Peter stood outside an old house called Blackwood Manor. The house looked broken, with cracked walls and shattered windows. The cold wind blew against him, making the trees around him sway like weird figures in the dark.
The people in the nearby village always whispered about Blackwood Manor. They said it was haunted, that strange noises came from inside, and that shadows moved on their own. Some even claimed to hear whispers calling their names at night.
But Peter loved history. He wasn't afraid of ghost stories. He wanted to know the truth about the house and the family who once lived there. Even though he felt a little nervous, his curiosity was stronger.
Taking a deep breath, he pushed open the rusty iron gate. It creaked loudly, as if warning him to turn back. The wind howled through the broken windows, sending a chill down his spine.
As Peter walked up the stone path, dry leaves crunched under his feet. The wooden door in front of him was cracked and covered in cobwebs. He hesitated for a moment before pushing it open. Inside, the house smelled of dust and old wood. His flashlight flickered as he stepped in. The floor creaked under his weight, and the air felt heavy, as if the house itself was watching him.
Broken furniture, torn curtains, and dusty paintings filled the large hall. Everything looked forgotten, abandoned for years. Then, suddenly, Peter heard something, a whisper.
Leave, before it's too late.
Peter's heart pounded. He spun around, but there was no one there. His hands tightened around his flashlight. Was his mind playing tricks on him? Shaking off his fear, Peter decided to explore further. He walked down a dark hallway, the wooden floor creaking with every step.
At the end of the hallway, Peter found a room. The door was slightly open. He pushed it wider and stepped inside. Inside, the room was filled with old furniture. A large bed covered in dust stood against one wall. The wallpaper was peeling, and cobwebs hung from the ceiling. But what caught Peter's attention was a large cracked mirror hanging on the wall.
Peter walked closer to the mirror. He saw his reflection, but then his breath caught. Behind him stood a woman in an old, torn gown. Her face was hidden in shadows. A chill ran down his spine. His hands shook. Was the woman really there? Or was it just his imagination?
Peter rushed to the door and pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers returned, louder this time. His flashlight flickered, and the room grew colder. The woman in the mirror was no longer just a reflection. She was inside the room, standing in the corner.
The shadows in the room moved. They stretched across the floor, reaching toward him. Peter backed away. The room felt smaller, as if it was closing in on him. Suddenly, the mirror cracked even more, and something moved behind the glass. A pair of hands, pale and bony, pressed against the surface from the inside. Peter's breath hitched. He had to get out.
In his panic, Peter knocked over an old chair. As it hit the floor, the impact caused the wooden panels beneath it to shift. A trapdoor. Without thinking, Peter lifted the trapdoor and climbed down into the darkness below. It wasn't a basement, it was a hidden tunnel. He was trapped.
Peter pressed himself against the stone wall. He couldn't see anything, but he could hear something moving, slow, dragging footsteps. The walls felt strange. They weren't just cold stone. They were moving, breathing. Then, a voice whispered directly into his ear, "Run."
Peter didn't need to be told twice. He ran down the tunnel, his breath coming in short gasps. The walls seemed to shift around him, the passage twisting and turning as if it was alive. Then, suddenly, he hit a dead end. A single wooden door stood before him. There was nowhere else to go. He reached for the handle, his hand shaking, and pushed it open.
Inside was a small room, filled with old portraits. The faces in the paintings were twisted, their eyes wide with horror. A single chair sat in the middle of the room, facing an old television that flickered with static.
The television screen buzzed, then cleared. A grainy video played. It showed a boy, someone who looked just like Peter, walking through Blackwood Manor. Peter's blood ran cold. How was this possible? Then, in the video, the boy turned around, and standing behind him was the woman in the torn gown. Peter spun around. The room was empty. A cold breath touched the back of his neck. Slowly, he turned his head. The woman was standing right behind him, her face no longer hidden. It was his own face.
Peter let out a scream, but no sound came out. The world around him started to roar. He was being pulled into the mirror, into the video, into something beyond reality. Then everything went black.
The next morning, the villagers noticed that Blackwood Manor's door was slightly open. But Peter was never seen again.